In this episode, take a tour of Alderford, a fictitious double-O gauge layout based on the Northwest. Phil Parker provides advice on unsoldering those pesky mistakes you've made, and I build a single-road laser-cut locomotive shed, ideal for those compact spaces.
I'm here at Alderford with its builder Carl. Carl, tell us a bit about the layout. What inspired? Where is it? When is it? And what inspired you to build it?
Well, Alderford is a fictional location. It's based somewhere in the northwest, in connection with the West Coast Main Line, and is set in the period of 1985 to 1990.
So sectorisation.
Sectorisation, blue and
grey. But before we got a lot of multiple units appearing.
Yes, okay. We're still on the infancy with a multiple unit era.
What made you pick that? Is that your train spotting days or something?
Sort of, yes. It's my biggest time of train spotting on the railways.
And certainly the period when it was very interesting at that point.
Yes.
Because we've still got a lot of local haul trains at that point.
A lot of local haul. Colour variation was creeping in quite rapidly as well. So.
And I'm seeing the first sprinters and that sort of thing appearing on there as well.
Yeah, so there's a representation of both first and second generation DMUs still. So
fantastic. Okay, now I've got to say that the first thing that strikes everybody about this layout is the overhead.
Yes.
Now that is, it's an impressive thing. Overhead is always strikes me as terrifically difficult to model. Is it?
In some respects. The system itself is mainly scratch built, in situ, using a lot of etched brass for the uprights, brass wire for the head spans. The only proprietary stuff off the shelf are the actual wires and insulators from Somerfeld.
How long did it take you? How long is the layout for a start?
The layout itself is 38 foot long.
And the overhead runs for the whole length of it?
Yes.
So, yes. How long a project was that?
It took about 8 weeks on and off. So probably 2 or 3 sessions,
But presumably the overhead was very much part of the original scheme?
Oh yeah, straight away from the word go, there was going to be overhead wires on it.
So you knew what you were in for?
Going back to a bit of the inspiration was an article I was reading on Liverpool Lime Street.
Mm-hmm.
Now I wasn't going to build Liverpool Lime Street, but that's what inspired the layout. At a period when obviously Lime Street's got overhead wires as well. So.
Now, how many people are actually working on the layout, or were working on the layout? Because you've got a good team of operators here. I think I'm seeing about 5 operators at the moment.
It can employ 6.
Right.
At its full operational capacity.
And were you all involved in the building, or?
No, mainly me for its biggest majority. One of my colleagues at the fiddle yard, he's helped a lot with the scenery aspects. So
great stuff. So really, you did know what you were going to get. You did have to know what you were getting into with this. And the other thing, it's well signalled. You've done your research on this.
I've done a little bit of research. It's still not absolutely perfect, but
you're using,
to my knowledge, I've done what I can.
Right, and the signal is automatic, is it? Because you've got little infrared sensors, I see.
Yes, the main signalling uses infrared detection. So when a train passes over the sensor, light bounces off the bottom of the train and triggers the signal back to, just resets back to red.
Amazing.
The signalman on the control panel actually sets the signal to anything else other than red.
Okay. So, control-wise, DC, DCC?
Digital.
Which digital system are you using?
I've gone with a lens set 100.
Any particular reason for that?
It was the most popular with the other people in the club itself. So.
Right. Okay. So you're part of the Preston Club.
Preston and Model Railway Club.
So presumably you've recruited from there, and rolling stock, is that all yours, or is it part? Is it a team effort as well?
A lot of it's mine. Philip, is another contributor with rolling stock and locos and built.
I mean, overhead electric locos are relatively rare still. As we speak, the new Bachmann 90 has just appeared in the week before.
It has, yeah.
So presumably you're quite keen, obviously, to see more of these sort of things.
Oh, definitely. Yes. The southern region electric EMUs have been well catered for. We could do to see some overhead electric EMUs as well. So.
A few people are looking at the overhead there and saying, right, well, I could do that.
It is, yeah, it is possible because PECO are starting to bring a proprietary system to the market as well.
So hopefully that's going to open it up.
It's still in its infancy, but yes.
It's going to open it up for a bit more people to do what you've done.
Definitely.
Thanks very much for your time.
You're welcome.
And it really is fascinating watching these things operate. And I have to say, it does take me back a bit to the era when I was watching trains properly. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Today, I'm going to show you a little technique that I must admit I struggled with until I was shown how to do it, and that is removing solder from, well, places you don't want the solder to be, basically. The thing with model making is that half the battle is knowing how to fix things when you get things wrong. We do get things wrong, I get things wrong, everybody gets things wrong, but the clever ones are the ones who can fix it afterwards. Now, I'm doing a little bit of electronics here, and I've got a couple of resistors in this little PCB, and I've put them in the wrong holes. I'm not paying attention properly when I'm soldering this. So what I've got to do is I've got to desolder them and drop them out and swap them over. It should be a fairly simple job, except that I've done quite a neat soldered joint there, and I've got to clean it up. And this is the clever technique that I was shown. There are a couple of ways of removing excess solder. Now, one of them is to use a desoldering pump. This is a sprung-loaded syringe with a sort of heat-proof tip, and cost me all of £2.95, this thing. All I do is take my hot soldering iron and I place it onto the solder joint, having cocked the pump. As the solder melts, put the tip in there, press the trigger, and the solder pump will suck out the solder and just suck it up into the body of the pump. I might do that again, just get another dose. There we go. And I can do the same for the other joint. Now, it's quite good, this, and it tends to be better on kit parts where you've got a bit of a structural joint there. But I'll be honest, it's got most of the solder off on this, and I think I can just wiggle it and eventually the resistor will come out. However, this is the clever bit. This is the bit I had to be shown. I was shown how to use this stuff, which is called Desoldering Wick, and it comes in, this is £1.95's worth of Desoldering Wick, and there's quite a bit in there, but here's what it looks like out of its holder. What it is, it's a copper braid, and the copper braid is impregnated with flux. So when I place it onto the soldered joint, the solder should wick up the braid and pull away from the joint. All you do is place the braid over the soldered joint, heat the braid, and as the heat goes, it pulls up the solder into the braid itself, where you can then pull it away from the joint. A little bit more heat there, and sometimes wheel it backwards and forwards. I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but this braid is now full of solder. Now, somebody's going to say, can you get the solder back? The answer is probably you can, but quite frankly, it's a lot of hassle to do it. And a little bit more work on there, and I'm pretty certain that that resistor will come free without doing any damage to the circuit board or damage to the resistor, and I can just re-solder it when I want it. There we go. It's free, and I can put it back in the right hole this time. Now, this is quite handy stuff, this desoldering braid, because you can use it for cleaning up all sorts of mucky soldered joints. I've been a bit of a pig's ear attaching this feed wire to my test track. It's a bit of a blobby mess. If I'm honest, I used a cheap bit of old wire, and I don't think it was particularly good, and I was working quickly. So what I'm going to do to tidy it up, I'll throw this bit of wire away, and there we are. That's got rid of the wire. That's a pretty horrible bit of wire. That I think it's a sort of steel core rather than a copper core, so it's not going to take the solder very well. I'm going to snip off the braid, and there we go. Throw that bit of soldery stuff away, and then put this against the track. Again, just heat the braid, and it should just soak up the excess solder. Look at that, soaking up the excess solder nicely. It's a bit like when you use a kitchen towel to clean up some spillage when you're making a cup of tea. You can actually watch the solder flowing up into the braid, and there we are. That's nice and neat and clean, and it's actually tinned, so it's ready for me to make a replacement joint. So there you are. That's quite a quick little hint and tip this time, but certainly one I found incredibly useful since I found it out, so that's why we decided to share it today.
In this issue of BRM, you might well have seen John Earth's Bossby, which makes excellent use of card kits, many of which are from Metcalfe. But if you're looking to enhance your model railway, which uses many card kits, you can start to look at laser cut kits, and this is something that might just push the boundaries of your modelling just that little bit further, and it requires a slightly different skill set, but it's not too advanced as with scratch building. So let's take a look at a laser cut kit from KS Laser Designs today in the studio. The RRP on this one is £30, and what you get is a single road engine shed. Now this is something that many small layouts can justify. It doesn't take up too much room on your model railway, and the footprint is quite small, ideal for a small little tank engine. So inside we've got the instructions. We've got all these lovely parts which are already cut out for us, and you can see the advantage of a laser cut kit like this is that all those edges are very neat, precision cut, and more importantly we've got 3D relief and detail on it. So all of these bricks here that you can see are, well, you can, once you've painted it, adds a lot of texture, so that's something that you don't ordinarily get in a card kit. So continuing, we've got some Perspex glazing inside, again all pre-cut, precision cut to the right size. We've got a few little bits of detail to add, so the engine shed doors, some little barge boards there, and little archways above the windows. The window frames themselves in a thinner card this time, so you get the two different thicknesses, and the roof, of which all the slates are pre-cut. And again, some more little bits of trim there to fit around the sides of the building. So, all in all, as you can see, there are a few components to build, but it all looks pretty straightforward. So let's get stuck into this kit and see how it's built. Okay, so before starting to build the kit, I've read the instructions, and it's time to talk about choice of glues. Now, many people prefer to use something like a laser cut glue, essentially a derivative of PVA adhesive. So this one here, for example, we've got NOC 61104, which is available from Gagemaster. Or you can use something like a super glue. So we've got Loctite, we've got Power Bond. Essentially, a super glue, you want something that's going to absorb into the wood quite readily, which is something super glue does very well, but not linger too long on the dry time. So I'm going to use a super glue for this build because it's just going to set that bit quicker, enable us to make good progress, and we can get cracking with the kit. So let's get started. So we've got two sides here. We've got two ends, as you'd expect with a shed, and because they aren't labelled in the instructions as to which one goes where, we need to check which side this end should glue to, and we can do so with the roof, because if the roof doesn't fit, we know we've glued it to the wrong side. So let's just check that against the length of the sides. You can see we've got quite a bit of an overhang there, which leads me to believe that this should be glued to the ends of the wall, and it's actually all hidden by this trim anyway, which is glued down the edge of the join. So if we just get gluing those into place, so I'm just going to hold the two sides together on the cutting mat to make sure they're level. take the top off the super glue, and we'll just apply a little bit into the corner along that edge. So super glue is an adhesive which glues upon contact of moisture in the air. So if you blow on the joint, the moisture from your breath will help cure it a little bit quicker. But if you want, you can get particular solvents in a spray form which will almost pretty much set the super glue straight away. So look out for those if you're in a rush to build a kit. And you can see already it's starting to take the joint there. Okay, so whilst this is drying, we'll just fast forward through the rest of the steps as I just glue the other ends into position, and we'll catch up when we start to add some of the detail to the kit. Okay, so that was quite simple, just a few bits to glue there together. So we've only got at this stage 6 pieces which are glued together, but that gives us the main superstructure. The rest is really just detailing with these little add-on parts. Now there is one important thing to remember when you're building this kit, and that is to double check the roof. One of these pieces is slightly longer than the other in terms of its width, and that's because it needs to overlap the other side of the roof. So you just need to make sure that you get the right one on the right side and that the butt join correctly, and the rest is just plain sailing, making sure you've got everything square. Now it comes to adding these little bits. So we've got some little brick details to add on here. I'm just going to use the same super glue as I work my way around. We've got some little doors there. We've got the engine shed doors as well. Now we can always model these. Now the engine shed doors we can model either shut or open. So I think it's a good idea if you want to park anything in the shed to at least have one end open and the other side perhaps shut, just so that you can hide something in it if you want. So that's the plan. Once we've added all these little details, we'll have a look at some of the glazing and catch up in a bit.
A few of the raised barge boards are slightly too long, so I'm cutting these to the correct length on the cutting mat with a scalpel and sanding the edges with a sanding stick. Always test fit before gluing, and once satisfied, use the same super glue to fix everything into place. A pair of tweezers are useful for manoeuvring small components into position. The doors are carefully positioned, and the end shed doors can be posed open or shut. I found gluing the two doors together made them easier to fit.
So emptying this second bag of details, this is all of the finer, thinner card, which you can see there has all been precision laser cut. And this is for all of the apertures, so the windows, and also some of the stonework which goes up the edge of the building. So this here, for instance, you can see we've got a little line down the centre, and this has got to be accurately folded in half. So I'm going to show you a quick technique. This is a steel rule from DCC Concepts. It's very handy because you've got all of the measurements there for working in 00 gauge for when you're bending wire handrails and things like that. So if you're working with a metal steel rule, which is something that I recommend you do when you're making kits and things, this is another rule that you can have alongside just to make quick, easy measurements. Anyway, we're not going to use any of those measurements for making this kit, but we can just use it there. So if we just align it, so we've got our fingers along the back of the card like so, just supporting it. We've got the centre line there against the edge of the rule, and we can just use something like this sanding stick here along the edge there and just bend it round at 90 degrees. So the next stage, of course, is getting some super glue along this. And once we've applied the super glue, I found I needed to trim just a tiny bit off the end of one. You can see there's not much to trim off, perhaps about 1.25 course of stonework there just to trim off the edge. And hey presto, it glues on nicely, just adding a bit of detail to the edge of the building. Now, where the rest of the building is concerned, these are for the windows, and something that you're going to have to deal with is the painting of the building. It's a laser cut kit, and it's quite easy to spray it, something I recommend, with a primer first to prevent the paints from being readily absorbed into the wood. Wood is one of those materials where it's quite porous, and as soon as you apply paint on it, the wood does tend to sap a lot of that paint in. So what I tend to do is seal it first with a primer. Of course, you can't do that if you've got all of your glazing in place first. So here's the plan. Spray it first after adding all of these little coins along the corners, and then once that's dry and you've painted the building, perhaps even weathered it to some degree, you can then add all of your glazing last. So let's just add these coins into place and catch up and see the completed model. There's nothing overly taxing about this model build, and it's ideal for those who have experience building card kits. And a quick spray of white primer later, it's complete and ready to paint. With many kits to choose from in the KS Laser Designs range, there's sure to be one for you. And finally, using some Deluxe Materials glue and glaze, the building with the completed windows. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Stay tuned next month for more great model railway action and advice. Until then, happy modelling.